Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from the FIDE Grand Prix 2019. This is a game from round 2 well, round 2 also has two classical games as round 1 had two classical games. All the games in round 2 in game 1 were drawn, so this is game 2. Let's check it out. It's Radoslaw Wojtaszek versus Peter Svidler, so both of them advanced to the second round. And before we check out the game, we do have a couple of nice photos. There you have Peter Svidler being checked for any funny business. Maybe maybe he has an Alpha Zero integrated into his tuxedo or something. You can never be too sure. And also here's a nice photo of Radek being checked for same. I don't know what the device actually does, but it probably looks for some sort of electromagnetic signal, maybe coming out of the person or something. But if any of you do know, do share in the comments so we can all increase our vast knowledge. And here we have a nice photo of the two of them playing. It's from game 1 in round 2. As you can see, Svidler has the white pieces here, and in the game we're showing Svidler has the black pieces, but it is the only one that I have. And also, if you look very carefully, you can see a wild Daniel Dubov appear in the background. There you have it. So those were the photos. I do hope you enjoyed that. Now let's check out the game. So a very important game, as if one of them wins, the other one gets knocked out of the FIDE Grand Prix. So Wojtaszek has the white pieces, and we have d4 on the board. Knight to f6, we have c4 and the g6. And it, like I said, it's a very important tournament, so it's not all that weird that all the games in round 2 game 1 ended in a draw. Everyone's playing really just safe lines. None of the funny businesses is even a possibility here. So here, of course, Svidler would be very happy to see knight c3 and d5 if he could go into the Gruenfeld defense, which he's famous for. But Radek knows that, and of course he goes for f3. This is the Anti-Gruenfeld, and we're gonna go into a very nice theoretical line. We have e6 by Svidler, e4, we have c5 now, and d5, grabbing more space in the center. We have d6, knight to c3, and now comes bishop to g7. Just continuing, and here comes knight g to e2. Also, this position was on the board in Ding Liren versus Alexander Grishuk in the Gashimov Memorial, where just captures on d5 was played. But here, Svidler opts for a different line. Bishop to g7, knight g to e2, preparing to go to g3, and here we have just castles. And it's a very popular position to play, especially nowadays. There are over 500 games with this exact same position in the database. So here, Svidler castles. Also interesting, Svidler had this exact same position against Levon Aronan in Palma de Mallorca in the Grand Prix of 2017, where he captured on d5. But here again he goes for a different line. That game against Levon Aronan ended in a draw. Here he castles, and now comes knight to g3. Also, that line that we've shown where he, instead of castling, went e captures on d5. Carlsen also had this position against Jan Nepomniachtchi in the Tata Steel 2019, where also e captures on d5 was played, and that game also ended in a draw. So Svidler castles with knight to g3, and now e captures on d5, c captures on d5, and now a6, just preparing b5. Of course, Wojtaszek is not interested in allowing b5, so he goes a4, and now just h5, preparing this h4 maneuver. Bishop to g5, preventing h4, and now comes queen to e8. Svidler unpins here, and is now ready to either do something with the knight, but also the queen does a lot of pressure along the e file. And here we have bishop to d3. Andrew Tang, also known as the Penguin, had two very nice victories with queen to d2, one of them in last year's World Rapid Championship. But okay, bishop to d3, continuing the game with knight to h7, now pushing the bishop back, bishop to f4, and now queen to e7. Just a very nice move with the queen. Now you can go g5 is a possibility, h4 is a possibility, and you have to decide what to do. Here, knight g to e2, making room on g3 for the bishop if needed, and here knight to d7. We have castles, and here we're still not in any new territory. There is one game that comes out of this position where h4 was played. It was between Nikita Vityugov and Ivan Cheparinov in the Gibraltar Masters of 2014 that ended in a draw. But here Svidler goes for knight to e5, and it is only as of this moment from move 15 that we have a completely new game on our hands. So now it's, unexplored territory. Of course, you don't want to give any of the bishops, you still want to keep your bishop pair, so bishop back to c2, and now rook to b8. Here Svidler is ready to push b5, but Radek doesn't allow it. We have a5, and here there are a couple of lines you could choose from. You could go h4 and then go f5. You could go f5 instead of h4 and then prepare h4. Let's say bishop to c1. You don't want your bishop on this line as after the ef file gets opened up. So after bishop to c1, you could continue h4, hoping for h3. White would then push, let's say, h3, captures, knight captures, bishop to f5 can be played. This is one of the lines that was possible after Wojtaszek's a5. But here, Svidler wants to forcefully bust open the b file. He plays b5, allows this a captures on b6 en passant. We have rook captures on b6, and now just bishop to c1, not allowing rook captures on b2. And also, you don't want this bishop on the f file, like we already mentioned. We have h4 by Svidler, and now comes f4, pushing the knight back. We have knight to g4, and now just h3, preventing h3 by black, and also forcing black to decide what to do with the knight. We have knight back to f6, and now comes rook to a2. Just a nice rook maneuver, as you want to get this bishop back into the game. For the moment, the rook doesn't have all that many things to do, so bishop to e3 is the plan. We have bishop to d7 by black, maybe bishop to b5 an idea. If black could get his pawns back together, it would definitely be an achievement. And now queen to e1, just threatening to win the h4 pawn. We have knight to h5 by Svidler, now the queen guards the h4 pawn, and now bishop to e3 as planned. And now rook f to b8, doubling up on the b file. And here, while you could defend the b2 pawn in a lot of ways, you could go queen here, you could go bishop here. Wojtaszek goes for b3, and he allows a very nice exchange sacrifice that is even the engine's favorite, and Svidler goes for it. With rook captures on b3, bishop captures on b3, and rook captures on b3, threatening to win the knight here. And now you can see that, well, much like in the Benoni, for example, you have this very nice dragon here, and also the rook on the open b file complement each other very nicely. So bishop to d2, defending the knight, bishop to d4 check. Now you have to go to h2. If you go h1, then knight to g3 will be very dangerous. So king to h2, and now comes knight 7 to f6. And here Svidler says, okay, I'm just gonna start an attack against your king. Feel free to, capture my pawn if you want. I'm not interested in defending that. But it's interesting that the engine screams that rook captures on a6 is a winning move. But it's it's not something you would play. It's one of those disgusting engine lines where after rook captures on a6, for example, bishop c8, going after the rook. Now comes rook to c6, attacking the bishop, bishop back, attacking the rook, and now just rook to f3. And this appears to be just a dominant position. You don't really care about your rook here. If black captures, you're just going to have a very nice pass pawn here. Queen captures on h4 is the idea. Now if bishop captures, you will capture here. And now, for example, rook b6, you go after the rook. Now just knight d5. You attack here, here you attack here. After this gets traded off, now you have a protected pass pawn on c6, and it should be winning for white. But Wojtaszek trusts Svidler. He says, okay, I'm just going to prepare that. We have rook to f3, and now maybe I'm just going to capture the a6 pawn on the next turn. And here Svidler says, well, if you haven't captured it on the previous turn, I'm not going to defend it now. So just rook to b4. And here Wojtaszek captures it with rook captures, and now rook to c4. Here Svidler has some ideas of busting open in the center of the board, but Wojtaszek prevents it. We have rook to a7, pinning the bishop here, as the queen on e7 would be taken. We have queen to d8, getting the queen out of the way, but now comes queen to a1. And now you can see that the rook to a8 is the threat. So what do you play here? Here you could go for queen to e7, just getting the queen out of the way. But then you get bishop e1, going for the h4 pawn, and here after g5 defending, you would get queen to a6. Just going after that rook on c4, and now you would either have to give up yet another exchange, or you would have to go rook to b4, but then gets f captures on g5, attacking the knight, and here white is just completely winning. There's not much black can do. If you capture here, you're just going to get captures, bishop e5 check, king to h1, and now rook captures on e4. But then white can just play queen d3, attack the rook, and after the rook moves, let's say here, captures, you're gonna go bishop captures on h4, and you are just much better here. There's no compensation for the exchange, and once the queen moves, let's say g6 can be played, and white will just bust open. So after this queen to a1 move, Svidler decides he doesn't want to move the queen, rather he goes knight captures on e4, and it's a nice idea. A lot of pressure here going on the king side towards the white king. Of course the knight cannot capture as the knight is pinned here, the queen would be lost, but he allows rook to a8. So this was Svidler's idea, bishop to c8, and only now will I continue what I've been doing in the center. But here he misses a very nice move from Wojtaszek, and it's well, it's actually a winning move for white. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find this idea for white in this position. I'll give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are an excellent lifter of queens. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, here we have queen to a6, a nice queen lift. That's not even a turn, but you know, I have to call it something. And now you have to see that rook captures on c8 is a terrible threat. If you capture, then you simply get rook captures on d8 check, king moves, but no longer is the knight pinned. So knight captures here will just, if you count the pieces, leave white up a whole rook. So of course, completely winning for white. You can't go for this trade, so Svidler goes for a different one. We have knight captures on d2, giving up the queen, rook captures on c8, now the queen can no longer move as the king is still on g8, knight captures on f3 with check, g captures on f3, and now queen captures on c8. There was nothing better. Queen captures on c8 with check, king to g7, and here just knight captures on d4. You want to trade down as you are up so much material, rook captures on d4, and now queen to d8. Just getting ready to capture on d6, create a nice pass pawn here. We have rook to d2 check, king to g1, and now knight captures on f4. And it would be nice if there's a rook on the second rank, the king is on the first rank, you have a knight, so some drawing chances could exist, but they don't exist here. Here queen captures on d6 was played, knight captures on h3 with check, king to f1 by Wojtaszek, and it was in this position that Peter Svidler resigned the game, which is very unfortunate, as this game now means that he's knocked out of the FIDE Grand Prix 2019. What could you do here? Well, really nothing. If this knight was instead of let's go back a few moves. If you could get this knight to f3 somehow, then it would indeed be a draw, and it's something, if you haven't seen it, you should remember it. Sometimes your opponent might have an extra queen, and you'll be having some drawing chances. So I'm just gonna play a few very silly moves. Just ignore them. I'm just gonna do them so I can position the knight. Let's say king h1, knight here, king here, and now if the knight was here, now Svidler would have a draw. For example, knight captures here, and now king f1, you just check him again. King e1, you just go knight f3 check. Knight also defends the rook, the king has to go to f1, you just repeat, knight h2 check, or, I mean, you could capture with the queen, but then the rook is just much stronger than the knight. Here, king g1, you just repeat, and now you have to go back, because if you go to h1, then it doesn't really work, then you get rook to h2 check. Queen captures on h2, you get knight captures on h2, king captures on h2, and now you have this position where, okay, white still has the knight, but after king to f6, you get, let's say, knight e4, you could go here, king e5, and now well, it's basically a draw. If you capture here, then black can capture on d5, you can push d6 in hopes of maybe somehow saving the game, winning the game. Black is not able to capture here, but you can just start pushing your c4 pawn or not. You could go king to e6 and just wait, and the white shouldn't be able to win this game. But yeah, especially a nice position to just remember. Okay, if the queen doesn't guard the h2 square, then it's a clean draw. But with the queen there, it's, you have to work for your meal. But a nice position to remember. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Here we have also a nice photo of, well, it's not nice for Svidler, but he's very, very sad that how this game turned out. But you can't win all of them. So yeah, like I said, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank VH Neil for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the FIDE Grand Prix 2019, and if I manage the chance, we are also going to simultaneously continue the Capablanca saga. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.